but to remember that Christmas is hard for some people, that this season is difficult because maybe they lost a loved one right around Christmas. Um, maybe some other tragedy happened in their life around Christmas, and all of this just brings back a flood of bad memories. And absolutely, it happens. It's something we should be aware of. But I don't think that we should be unjoyful during this time because maybe somebody had a bad experience.
Welcome to Fireside Talks, where we help bring you from survival to stability
through skills, support, and the hope of Jesus Christ. Hello again, and welcome back to Fireside Talks. Much like last month, it's the first Monday or first podcast of the month, and this is going to be kind of setting the tone for the rest of the month for our podcasts. Now, obviously, it is currently December 6th on a Saturday afternoon or evening. If I look a little worn out and tired, it's because I worked all day and then came home tonight, and we probably got, I don't know, 5, maybe 6 inches of snow today. So I had to do a little cleaning up when I got home from work today. But how do we go into December and into the Christmas season and not at least talk a little bit about the birth story of Jesus? And I'm sure many of you have been to a church service before on a Christmas Eve or a Christmas service, or many of your churches are probably going through the birth story right now, which is completely normal for this church season, if you will. And I wanted to talk maybe something about just a little bit different. So Christmas, and this actually stems from a conversation Samantha and I had earlier in the day. Actually, while I was on my lunch break at work, I usually call home and check in and see how things are going. And we were talking, and I don't even know how we got started on the subject. And to be honest with you, when Samantha was talking about it, I said that she needed to do this podcast tonight, and she needed to be the one to talk about this topic. And she said, "No, I'll just get mad." But we were talking about how during Christmas or the Christmas season, and there's a lot of things we can say about the Christmas season and the way it's done in churches and the way it's done secular in the secular world, on how Christmas has become more about the trees and the lights and the gifts than it actually has about the birth of Jesus. And I guess if I really wanted to get to the nitty gritty of it and get down to my personal beliefs and hear that it's my personal belief and no one else's, I think maybe we do put too much emphasis on Christmas and not enough on Easter. Because while the birth of Jesus is important, don't get me wrong, I think the resurrection is something that we don't celebrate enough. Maybe that should be when we decorate the house and give gifts to each other, because on that day, on that Easter Sunday, we've received the gift of salvation. Maybe that should be when we give the gifts. Maybe that's something you can start in your family, and you won't have to have the stress of Christmas shopping anymore. I don't know. Just a personal thought, not a big deal. But we do celebrate Christmas here in our home, and we put up trees and I hang lights on the house, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And a lot of people, I've heard people argue about some of the history of Christmas and its background, and that's not what I studied to get ready for this. So we're not going to get in depth in it at all. But there's absolutely some arguments to be made that Jesus wasn't born December 25th. which undoubtedly he wasn't. Um, but we don't have a date. We don't know the date. We had to pick a date, and that's what the early church chose. Um, so we're going to continue to run with it. It's been that way for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years now. But one of the other things about Christmas is it can be incredibly difficult for some people. And this all kind of stemmed from, I think it was a social media post that Samantha seen that basically said, and rightfully so, and I don't think it's a wrong thing to think, but to remember that Christmas is hard for some people, that this season is difficult because maybe they lost a loved one right around Christmas. Um, maybe some other tragedy happened in their life around Christmas, and all of this just brings back a flood of bad memories. And absolutely, it happens. Something we should be aware of. Um, but I don't think that we should be unjoyful during this time because maybe somebody had a bad experience during Christmas. If we're genuinely following the reason for the season, which I'm sure is a normal churchy word that you've heard, um, we should be joyful. We see in the birth story in Luke, and I'm just going to grab some of that out of Luke chapter 2. And Joseph also went up from Galilee to the town of Nazareth to Judea to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed. Something important to remember about the betrothal. Once during that time in that culture, once you're betrothed, um, it's almost as good as being married. Because once you're betrothed, it's one of those things that's very difficult to get out of. Um, you would almost have to follow like a divorce proceedings, almost. Um, so for Mary to go with David to Bethlehem because she is his betrothed to be counted for the census, at this point she would, or not with David, I'm sorry, with Joseph. Um, Once she's betrothed to him, she would have been counted as his family. So, continuing on. With Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And this would have been a crazy controversy during the time that this was written, because if she's betrothed, she's not married, she better not be with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. So, few things that I think we look at incorrectly when we look at the birth story is the manger isn't the location; it's a thing. Um, the um, the idea of that wooden picturesque manger that we all put on our mantles and in places in our home this time of year really isn't that correct. But again, I think that's one of those things that while it's probably not historically accurate, it's also not one of those things worth arguing about. But to be with child, to be betrothed, all of these things would have been very controversial when this was written. And then it continues on and it talks about the shepherds and the angels and how the shepherds were out in the field watching their flock, and an angel of the Lord appeared to them. And the glory of the Lord shone around them. and they were filled with great fear. And that's something that's very, very common in scripture, that whenever God shows up, it scares people. And whether it's God or his messenger or whatever it is, whenever God's glory shows up, it scares people. But the angel told him not to be scared. I bring good news of great joy that will be for all people. So, right off the bat, while these shepherds are out in the field tending their flocks, working like always, it's just a random Tuesday for them. There's nothing special about tonight. They're at work. They're doing what they've been probably trained to do since they were small children. But fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy. And I think that's the part of Christmas we miss the most: the good news and the great joy. See, working in retail, which I do enjoy. I enjoy the job I have. I enjoy um, the people I get to interact with. Um, and typically, since we're a sporting goods store, most people are happy when they're buying stuff there. It's not like buying car parts where you're angry that the brakes went out, or um, something broke on your car and you don't really want to be spending this money. Usually, people are in pretty good moods. Not always, but usually. Um, but you can see during this time of year some stress, some frustrations. Maybe you're going after that gift that your child, your husband, your wife, your grandkids, whatever it is, and then this is the only thing they've really asked for this year, and you get there and you can't find it. It costs more than you thought. The store's busy, or maybe they're out of it, and it just brings up all of this stress and this frustration of the holidays. But we're told right here that an angel said, I bring you good news of great joy. And I'll admit, sometimes during the holidays, it's stressful. Sometimes it's stressful because you got to talk to your mom and your mother-in-law, and what time are we doing Christmas at your house, and what time do I have to be at your house, and when am I going to have time to do Christmas with my own family, um, and then there's plays and concerts and all of these other things that we have to get to, and it's just so busy, and I still have to get my shopping done, and I don't know what anybody wants for Christmas. And but there's supposed to be news. We have news of great joy for all people, and I feel like that's the part we forget the most. So we should never be ashamed of the great joy because of the good news during Christmas. We should never be scared to share it. We should never be scared to show it. And yeah, there are people that are hurting this season. There are people that are mourning the loss of a loved one. But there should be great joy in the salvation that comes from Christ. We shouldn't be thinking about, and if we're being honest, these these tragedies, these hurts, these hardships, they don't just happen at Christmas. Loved ones die every day. And I'm not trying to sound cold-hearted or mean, but there's someone in your city, in your community, in your neighborhood, maybe in your small circle of influence, that experiences that pain every day from the loss of a loved one or some other tragedy. But it should never stifle the joy that we have in the good news. See, and later on, and I'll flip over here real quick to John 15. And if you're familiar with John 15, it's where Jesus is talking about being the true vine. It starts off with, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. See, when we start to hear about this idea of the true vine, it's the idea that Jesus is the one that's growing from the ground and giving us the nutrients that we live off of. See, if we scan down a little bit further, whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. See, so we're supposed to be grafted into Jesus. But what I really wanted to look at in this chapter is if you go to John 15:11, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. See, so anytime that we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about his birth, we're talking about his resurrection, we're talking about the salvation that comes from Christ, it should be joyful. It's so easy to get wrapped up into the things of the world during this time of year that we don't just lose sight of the meaning of what we're celebrating, but we absolutely lose the joy. And I think one of the greatest things, at least in our home right now, is with having our youngest, who's 3. Um, I think maybe he remembers Christmas just a little bit, but if he does, it's not much. And when you're driving down the road with him at night and he sees the Christmas lights, he points out every single one of them. But oh, look at the lights! They're so pretty. Oh, they're beautiful. See, he's taken in to the joy of the season. And not only at that, he's excited about the little things. And maybe you have traditions in your home. Maybe you have different things that you do throughout the Christmas season. And I don't think you can see it behind me, but if you can, there's a bunch of envelopes hanging on the wall behind me, and each one of them has a number written on them. And basically, it's our countdown to Christmas. It's an Advent calendar, is what it is, and we do something different every day. And sometimes it's simple. Sometimes we read a couple verses and there's some chocolates in there. Um, Sometimes it's a little more complicated, and Samantha does a good job scheduling those out. Looking at the calendar and seeing when stuff will work. But maybe it's something simple like tonight we're gonna watch that old claymation version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, or maybe it's more complicated than that, and um, the they're going to spend the day making cookies. It's all over the place, but I know one of those behind me. It's going to say, "Go look at Christmas lights." Um, but every day there's a little bit of a reading, a little bit of scripture that goes along with where we're at in the season. And those are the things that we need to remember as we're moving forward is the joy of the season. And I would argue that this joy isn't limited to the first 24 days or the middle 15 days or whatever it is of December. We should be able to experience that joy year round, and I recognize that that's difficult. There's peaks and valleys all throughout the year where things are going great and things aren't, and I recognize that. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to find the joy in a broken down car, in a job loss, in um, whatever situation may come. Sometimes it's very difficult to find the joy. But I would argue that's a state of mind. A joy and happiness are very different. See, joy is something that is who we are. Happiness is how we feel. See, so I can be joyful and sad. I can be joyful and frustrated. I can't be happy and sad. I can't be happy and angry, but I can still be joyful. It's more of a state of mind than a snapshot of an emotion. See, so we need to remember these things and don't be ashamed. Don't don't allow people to tell you that we have to remember the hurting. Yes, we need to remember the hurting, but we should still have joy. And if they don't, if you come across that person that just does not have that joy during this season, I bet it's because they don't have a relationship with Jesus. I'll bet it's because they don't know Christ as their Savior. I'll bet it's because they don't understand the salvation that comes from Him. Because in that, there's joy. So, as we move forward for the rest of this month, um, of course, in our house, we'll be spending a lot of time talking about the birth of Jesus. And then there's always that argument that, well, it it didn't happen in December, and the Christmas tree represents this, and all of these other things that people might say. But ultimately, it's the joy, and I don't think any of those things are worth arguing about because I certainly don't see it as a salvation issue. Um, so I would challenge you, though, as we go through this season, and then as winter, at least where we are in South Dakota, um, with this being our second, I'll say our second big snowfall of the year, winter's just getting started. And winter seems to last forever here. And sometimes it's hard to find a joy in February or in late January or sometimes in March when it's still cold and it's still gray and wet. Um, but I would challenge you to look for those opportunities to show joy through all of it. And I think if we start to go into our homes, into our communities, into our neighborhoods, into our workplace with a joyful heart, I'll bet you start to see a change around you. I'll bet you start to see things get a little bit better. So that would be my challenge is for you to be the joy in your community, in your circle of friends. Um, because remember, these things I have spoken to you that my joy may be in you. Remember, this is the words of Jesus, and He knows He's going to the cross. He knows what He has to do. And He's saying that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. See, in the very next verse in this chapter is, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you." And that's a whole nother episode, a whole nother podcast based off that one verse. That we absolutely should love our neighbors as ourselves, but here Jesus tells us to love one another as He loved us. So, celebrate, remember why we're celebrating, and enjoy the season. So, I hope you guys have a good Christmas. Um, I don't remember what we're talking about next time, but if you have any questions about what we're doing at Fireside Christian Church and Church Christian Community, reach out. There will be Links below for our website, for social media, for merch, whatever you need. And if you would like to support us, um, that information will be below also. Until then, like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys later.